Something strange happened in Australia on the 1st of July 2004. More babies were born on that day than on any other day in Australia's recorded history. And so this made the 1st of July 2004 the largest birthday in Australia's history. Now, it wasn't a random coincidence, and this also wasn't a medical mystery that couldn't be explained. This happened because the parents of those children wanted their kids born on the 1st of July 2004. So what made that date so special? It was the fact that thanks to a new law that had just been introduced in Australia that year, having your child on or after the 1st of July came with a reward of $3,000. So this is the story of how Australia created the new law, which then created the largest ever birthday in the country's history. The best place to start this video is to explain why Australia created this new law in 2004. No, actually, the best place to start this is to tell you what the law was and then tell you why they created the law. So let's go in that order. So get this, in May of 2004, the Australian government announced that children born on or after the 1st of July of that year would receive a baby bonus of $3,000. So that's it, right? That's the law. Have a baby on or after the 1st of July 2004 in Australia, and you would get a $3,000 cash gift from the government. No questions asked. So think of this as an instant birthday gift from the Australian government to all the new babies that would be born. And this law would also apply to families who adopted kids up to the age of 2 years old as well. Now, there were three interesting things about the baby bonus law. First, the baby bonus was paid per child. So if you had one child, you got $3,000. If you had twins, you got $6,000. If you had triplets, you got $9,000. And if you had quadruplets, well, you get the picture. Second, the baby bonus was tax-free, which meant the parents got to keep all of it without paying any taxes. And finally, the baby bonus was also a flat amount paid to everyone regardless of their income, which meant you still got the baby bonus even if you're already making $1 million per year in income. So that was the law. That was the baby bonus law. But why did Australia create it? Now, the most obvious answer here is actually the right one. The government wanted Australians to have more babies. And it's not because the government likes babies and finds them adorable or anything like that. It's because even though we often don't make the connection directly, babies are absolutely important for the economy. And I'll break it down. But first, a bit of historical context here. Right after the World War ended in 1944, there was a baby boom all over the world. People were having more babies, and why not? The war was over, a lot of young men had come back home from the war, and they no longer had to face the prospect of dying or thinking about dying. And so they made a lot of babies with their spouses, and it made perfect sense. The world and Australia had a baby boom. By 1960, 16 years after the war had ended, Australia's fertility rate was close to the highest it had ever been, at 3.4 children or births per woman. But then things started to change. The baby boom began to slow down and people started to have fewer kids. So here's a quick rundown of what that looked like. Remember that by 1960, the fertility rate was at 3.4 births per woman. But by 1970, it had dropped to 2.7 births per woman. By 1980, it was at 1.9 births per woman. By 1990, it had dropped even further to 1.8 births per woman. And in 2003, the year before Australia introduced the baby bonus law, the fertility rate was at 1.7 births per woman. The baby boom was clearly long gone and the government was terrified. Because remember how I said babies are important to the economy? Here's what that means. In most countries around the world, the fertility rate that's needed to replace your existing population is an average of 2.1 births per woman. And so having a fertility rate that's less than 2.1 births per woman basically means the country is not having enough babies to replace its population. And this is bad news for the economy. Because what it means in the long term is that the country will end up with an aging population and a shrinking labor force. And those two things are obviously not good for the economy. And anything that's bad for the economy is bad for the government. So that's why Australia created the baby bonus law. The Australian government wanted more people to have kids for the sake of the economy, and the government was willing to pay for it. And here's the interesting part. The government didn't even try to hide this. A guy named Peter Costello, who was Australia's federal treasurer at the time, was quoted as telling Australian couples that they needed to have one baby for mom, one baby for dad, and one for the country. Now, before I go on, if you're still watching this, how about you give the video a thumbs up? And of course, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button so you get to watch more cool videos that I make, like this one. Now back to the story. When new economic policies are made, economists often track how human behavior evolves in response to that economic policy. And in Australia, the baby bonus showed some pretty fascinating and interesting evidence of how human behavior changed in response to the announcement of the baby bonus law. So this new law was set to kick in on the 1st of July 2004. But remember, it had only been announced 7 weeks earlier, in May of 2004. And so this meant most people didn't get a 9-month head start to start making babies, targeting deliveries specifically for the 1st of July. Only those who were already pregnant and in their 3rd trimester and were due to have their babies pretty soon could possibly be eligible for the baby bonus on the exact day that it came into effect. Only very few people could have their kids on that day, right? But regardless, despite this very obvious limitation, Australia still recorded the highest number of births in its recorded history on the very first day that the baby bonus law came into effect. So how exactly did this happen? It happened because a lot of parents delayed and moved their delivery dates just to make sure they qualified for the baby bonus. A study published by researchers at the University of Melbourne and the Australian National University tracked this, and they provided evidence to back it up. So first, let's take a look at these two charts that show a day-to-day trend line of the number of babies that were born in June and July of 2004. When you compare both, it then becomes really interesting. In the top chart with the raw data, you can see the dip in births in the last days of June 2004, and then the sharp increase in the first day of July 2004. And then of course, in the second chart below, the shading provides an emphasis on the days of historically unusually low births, and then days of historically unusually high births. And as you can clearly see, births in the last week of June were historically unusually low, and births in the first week of July was historically unusually high. And this basically supports the researchers' theory that a lot of parents chose to delay and move their deliveries, no matter how stressful or painful that was, just to get the $3,000 baby bonus. In total, researchers estimate that nearly 1,200 births were moved just to ensure they qualified for the baby bonus. And the researchers also estimate that about a quarter of those births were moved by more than 1 week. So this wasn't a postponement of just a day or 2 days. Some of these births were moved by more than 1 week. Now, if anyone thought this was a fluke, well, 2006 also happened because the government increased the baby bonus to $4,000 starting from the 1st of July 2006. And again, if you look at the data, you see very clear effects with unusually low births in the last week of June 2006 and then unusually high births in the first week of July 2006. Now, aside from the nice bit of history about the 1st of July, the obvious question to ask here is if the law worked, if the baby bonus had any kind of impact on Australia's birth rate. And the answer is yes. According to data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in 2004, there were about 254,000 births recorded in Australia, which was an increase of just over 3,000 births compared to the previous year. But even more, the birth count in 2004 was the highest it had been since 1995 in Australia. So clearly, the baby bonus law had a clear short-term effect, but it also had a medium-term effect as well. Now remember that in 2003, Australia's birth rate had fallen to 1.7 births per woman. In 2004, it increased slightly to 1.78 births per woman. And then by 2008, it had reached 2.02 births per woman, which was the highest it had been in 32 years. But ultimately, the baby bonus law could only do so much. Australia's birth rate started to slow down once again, and now it continues to fall, just like in most other countries around the world. Today, the birth rate in Australia is close to what it was back in 2003. And the baby bonus has changed, so parents now only get about $2,400 for their first children, and they only get about 25% of this amount paid upfront. But Australia will always have the 1st of July 2004 as that historic day when more children were born than on any other day in its recorded history, thanks to the $3,000 baby bonus law. And if you just happen to be watching this on the 1st of July and you were born on the 1st of July 2004 in Australia, well, happy birthday to you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, then watch this next video about how global population is collapsing and how it would change the world by the year 2100. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. See you in the next one.